Josh here from Inside Wrestling Truth, and my guests today are Eric Draven and the Texas Outlaw. How are y'all doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good.
That's bad.
Tell us a little bit about the AWA Supreme and what roles y'all play in that company.
Well, I am wrestler, promoter, booker, I guess everything. Sometimes sound guy, advertiser. I guess I do just about everything that can be done. Started it 17 or 18 years ago. It started out as South Central Wrestling, and we later changed to Infinity Pro Wrestling, and then to Supreme Championship Wrestling, and then to AWA Supreme afterwards. We've used stars like Dutch Mantel, Coco Beware, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Shark Boy, Ricky Morton and Rob Conway several times. Yeah, I guess that's really about all I got on that.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you.
I hear you. Tell us how y'all got in the wrestling business.
I was actually trained by 3 different training companies. First one was before Ohio Valley Wrestling was called Ohio Valley. At the time, they were still called Nightmare Incorporated. I was trained by a guy named Roger Gardner in TV, and he ran a wrestling show called Ohio Valley Championship Wrestling. He trained me and Brandon Hunter for what seemed like a long time, but it was really only a couple of months, and then he started putting us in the ring way before we were ready. I later realized that I wasn't going to get anywhere with this guy, so I went to the USWA Wrestling Academy and trained there for 8 months, and when the head trainer went to WWE, I left there and went to Ohio Valley and finished out my training there. I think I was at Ohio Valley that time for 4 months. I later came back as a worker a couple of times. Was fired every time I went there. So.
Hey, it's self-explanatory. I've been trained by this man.
Okay.
6 years running.
How did y'all's gimmicks come about?
My original gimmick, I painted my face black and white, kind of like Sting does now. At the point in time, Sting painted his face orange and blue most of the time. I actually had gotten arrested for driving on a suspended license, and I was in jail for 2 days. And while I was in there was a Hit Parader magazine. I opened it up and I saw a picture of Kiss, and I thought it would be a cool wrestling gimmick. So I started painting my face like that. My wrestling tights is the only part of my wrestling gear that I ripped off of a wrestler. It's obvious it was ripped off of Jeff Jarrett's Double J gimmick in WWF. Jeff was the guy in charge of the USWA Wrestling Academy when I got trained, so we're kind of out of respect for Jeff.
That's cool.
The name, Eric Draven, I started wrestling under that name in 1992, and the movie The Crow didn't come out until 1994. It's merely coincidence. I'm not saying they stole it from me, but
Yeah.
my middle name is very close, and I had a lot of respect for Raven. Kind of marked out to him a little bit early on in his gimmick, so I took the D out of my middle name to make Eric, and put the D on Raven to make Draven, so that's where the name Eric Draven came from. Custom made, I think me and a friend of mine were just joking about something and saying that everything he had was custom made, and I like that, so
Yeah.
it became my gimmick name.
Mine was pretty much passed down from 2 bookers.
I think it was me and BW3.
Yeah.
We kind of modeled him after Stan Hansen, maybe a cross between Hansen and Bruiser Brody.
What are some of y'all's favorite matches?
I've enjoyed greatly anytime I've wrestled my brother Billy Maverick, Nick Noble, and had some great matches recently with Rob Conway. I remember some older matches with Roger Blade before his neck injury, back when Roger Blade actually took bumps, and some of those were pretty good. I think any match that I don't get hurt in is probably one of my favorites. I constantly see things that I could have done better, and I constantly see things that I'm like, wow, I can't believe I pulled that off. So I don't really have any ones to say stand out too much more than others.
Yeah.
I'd say don't put me over. Even though we've done 30 minutes one time.
Well, that was a good match.
Yeah, it was a good match. I'd say probably Vito and Eddie. We've always had some good feuds.
If I had to pick one match that really stood out for me, I'd say mine and Chris Calibers. We did a 60-minute Ironman match. We had that place when we were in the old arena downtown. We had 235 people in the building. It said 220.
Wow.
And it was good stuff. He actually put my head in the door and kicked the door closed on my head. And nobody got hurt. So it was my first Ironman challenge, and it went really well.
What legends have y'all worked with?
If you turn on TV and you see a legend other than Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan, I've probably worked with him. I've been wrestling for going on. I'm a week short of 22 years in wrestling, and anybody who has been in WWE, WCW, or USWA over the last few years, I've worked with at some point in time. I've never worked with Triple H. I've never worked with Hulk Hogan. I've never worked with Ric Flair, but I've worked with Lawler. I've worked with Dundee. Matter of fact, my top 5 favorite wrestlers when I was a kid was Lawler, Dundee, Dutch, Austin Idol, and Jeff Jarrett. And I've worked with every one of them. So. Also, Ricky Morton, probably worked with Ricky Morton probably 100 times now.
What has been y'all's worst injuries?
Mine's simple. I tore my shoulder doing a over-the-top rope moonsault to the floor. When I turned upside down, the guy that was supposed to catch me was about 2 feet too far, and right behind him was a little kid, so I ended up going a little sideways. I landed on my fingertips, and my arm went all the way back. I broke my shoulder, tore my clavicle, tore my labrum off. I wrestled the rest of that night. It was a tag team tournament. That was the first match of 3 for me that night. Then I wrestled the next night, and the next night, and then on that Monday, I went and found out my shoulder was broken. But since they can't cast a shoulder, I wrestled for over 2 years like that. You know, I finally had surgery. It was pretty rough. Also broke my neck on a gut ring knee lift. Somebody did a knee lift to the stomach, and I went to take a bump over. My foot slid out from under me, and I landed on my head. I didn't even know my neck was broke. I wrestled, took choke slams to the table 2 weeks later, and decided it was time to take a little time off. But really, that injury hardly even hurt. I just couldn't turn my head to the left.
I'd say probably not. I've had some pretty bad injuries, but nothing's really bad unless you have to have surgery. So when I had to have surgery on my foot for my 5th metatarsal being broken, that was pretty bad.
Who has been your all's best and worst promoters?
Well, I'd like to say that I was my own best promoter, but that's probably not true. If I had to pick somebody else, if I was going by fun, I probably had the most fun wrestling for Roger Blade. Sometimes I didn't agree with his decisions, and he didn't always draw a good crowd, but I always had a good time. And worst promoters, which I had a good time up there too, but probably the guys in Wabash, Damian Michaels. I didn't say anything bad about him since he's passed on, but it seemed like he would just get to the show, and that's the only time he would think about the show was while he was there. It didn't seem like he did any advertising, or it's hard to perform, in front of people you bring and 6 or 7 other people's friends and families. And, all in all, we had a good time up there, but sometimes the card would change 2 seconds before your match, and you wouldn't have any time to prepare for what you were going to do.
I'd say he's the best promoter so far. As for the worst, man, there's so many. Should I really call anybody out? I don't know. Can't really say them because I didn't work on the show. I just worked. Oh.
I will say, one time I was booked in Harlan, Kentucky for Jimbo Collins, PCW Wrestling, and he packed the house every single show, and we always had a good time down there. His best friend was a security guard, and I ended up marrying his best friend's ex-wife, and down in Harlan they don't take kindly to that, so he booked me on a show, and I drove 5.5 hours to get there. They were in the National Guard Armory in Harlan, and I walked in the door with a gun in my face, and so that's probably my worst experience.
Who's the stiffest guys y'all worked with?
Well, this gets he was pretty stiff when he first started, just kind of like anybody is. We got a guy, Dave Hovack, he's pretty stiff. He's actually out having surgery. He'll be back probably pretty soon. Really, I can't really think of anybody that stood out as being overly stiff. When I was green, I worked guys, the high rollers. I felt like they were stiff, but when I come to think of it, I think maybe they were just covering my mistakes. Not too long ago, my brother hadn't wrestled for 4 or 5 years, and he come up, and he's a pretty big guy, and he come up and done a show for us, and a lot of ring rust. So I told him if he needed to be stiff, just go ahead. That, you know, I can work off of it pretty good, and so he had no problem being stiff. But that was, you know, just that one time. Any other time I've worked it, he's been just fine.
Are we talking whole match or one move or just could go a long way?
Guido Andretti's always stiff. Vito Andretti, I wouldn't call him stiff, but he's really small. You definitely know his work when you work Vito. But I don't mind it being stiff as long as it looks good. The bad things are when you're in there and something hurts real bad, then you watch it on playback and it looks like it barely touched you or something like that. I don't have any complaints with anybody being stiff.
Do you have one? Or? I don't know, man. I took this one clothesline one time and it felt like it killed me. I have no trouble selling it, that's for sure. So we'll throw that one out to Damien tonight.
What guys in the business have become enemies or you have heat with?
Well, the easiest one for me is Matt Douglas. He was an enemy right from the get-go. When I first started running a wrestling show, he started running one. He'll claim that he ran his first. I say I ran mine first. We were both in Madison. Now, who's right or wrong on who ran first? You know, honestly, I can't really say. I'm sure it was me, but he's sure it was him, and that was 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So who's to say? His story is he just gave up and gave up the business and wanted to get out of the business. My side of it is I ran him out of business, and it's simple. We were running at the Five White Boys and Girls Club, and we were packing this gym, a basketball gym, every single. We ran monthly shows. He ran monthly shows. We were packing ours every single month. They were running at the fairgrounds, which is a building that 2 good-sized families could fill up, and he wasn't packing his every month. I was using trained professional wrestlers, guys who had already made names for themselves in the business, Diceman, Ronnie Vegas, the High Rollers, Johnny Lee Valiant. I mean, all these guys, if you're just if you just watch WWE, you may not have heard of them, but if you watch independent wrestling, especially in this area, you know who they are. Bobo Overkill Jr., Deputy Dog, all these guys were on my show, and then he was using guys that literally were untrained, and he'll probably even tell you they were untrained. What he did is he would go find a local guy who wanted to be a wrestler and say, hey, if you sell 10 tickets, I'll give you a match on my show. And I got a hold of 5 or 6 tapes of his shows to see what my competition was, and every single match was the same. He started out with a guy rocking up, back to the corner, 2 chops, a snap suplex, and then he would send Vic the Bruiser out in the chair, and Vic would smash their heads with the chair. Probably a good time for Vic, and I don't hold anything against Vic for doing that because he was getting paid to hit, ring guys with a chair, and I'd probably have done the same thing. But so that was the last I heard of him when he left the business back in, I think, 99 maybe 2000, I'm not sure, until 2010 or 2011, he sends me a message on Facebook, hey, how's the wrestling business going? And like he wants to be my friend or something like that. And I'm like, you know what, let's let bygones be bygones. And I invited him up to come watch the show. He come up to me afterwards like, man, I loved it. It was great. And I was like, well, you want to do something? I could use a ring announcer. And he jumped on it. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do whatever you want. And at the time, our commissioner was Jeremy Bevins, and he just took a job as a park ranger or something somewhere. They were going to have to take him on second shifts. And I'm like, we could use you as commissioner if you want to. And he wanted to. And first couple of weeks, we kind of played off each other in the ring. We just improv everything. And honestly, if we could have kept the relationship as, like that, without him moving up into a position of some kind of power or something, things could have been pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't an asshole, but the charisma that we had together in the ring and the reaction the fans got was good, and it could have been a good story for a long time. But he got greedy, I guess. And what happened is I had kind of leased out my concession stand to someone else because I lived pretty far away from town at the time, and for me to do all the advertising, book the show, and take care of everybody's little quibbles and stuff that they had with each other, plus get all the concession stand stuff and that kind of thing was just too much for me at the time. So I had given the concession stand to somebody for X amount of money per show, and this guy had too much on his plate too. And it comes to be that one day, an hour before the show, the guy calls me and is like, "Man, I can't do the concession stand anymore. I'm not going to be there tonight. I'm sorry." And Matt stepped up and he's like, "Hey, let's go get your stuff." So we go get the stuff. Matt calls his mom. His mom comes down and runs the concession stand. And then after the show, Matt comes to me. He's like, "Hey, I got an idea. Let me take the concession stand off your hands like the other guy was, and I'll just pick up where he left off." And I was like, "All right, yeah, sure." So Matt does that, and then the next week after the show, he comes up to me. He's like, "I can't risk losing money on the concession stand if I don't really got anything to gain." Which, if I thought about it, he had something to gain. If he put money in the concession stand and he sold things at a good price, which he raised the prices on everything as soon as he took over. We were selling 12-ounce cans at 75 cents, and he raised them to $1. We were selling candy bars at 75 cents, and he raised them to $1. We were selling bags of chips at 75, and he raised them to $1. So he was making money. I know he was, because we were making money before, but I didn't even think about it. And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "I was kind of thinking maybe we can do some sort of partnership." I'm like, "I'm not looking for a partner." He's like, "Well, here's what I'm talking about. I'll take care of everything up front, and you take care of everything in the back." He's like, "I don't want to deal with all the drama of the wrestlers, and I don't want to deal with the booking or any of the wrestling activities. I'll just deal with the people." And honestly, I got long hair, and I just don't look like the kind of guy that should go into a business and ask for a sponsor. And he did. He was a teacher, and he just looked like the guy that somebody would trust, which I know they would because I did. And so I let him have that responsibility, and that's when things went bad. He went behind my back and he trademarked my company name, Supreme Championship Wrestling. I had ran at that time, I think 13 or 14 years, and he just went and put a trademark on it. I never thought about trademarking it because, unfortunately, I didn't know the business end as well as I thought I did. And I didn't think I needed to. I mean, if you go, there's hundreds of wrestling promotions within 25 miles of here probably, and none of them, I guarantee you, not even Who's Your Pro, who's been there for 15 or 16 years, not even them, I would say, have their name trademarked or copywritten or whatever it is. And he went and he did that, and I didn't even know about it at first. So I'm at home one day, and at this point in time, I lived about 25 miles from where the wrestling building was. Right now, I live just down the road, about 5 miles away, so not a big deal now. But at that time, he calls me up. I worked third shift at the time, so I was half asleep. He calls me up and says, "You busy right now?" I said, "Not really." He said, "I got a guy that came in at the wrestling building that wants to talk to you, and I think you should come meet him." So I get dressed and I go into town and I meet this guy, and I'm under the impression that Matt and this guy have never really met each other, and they play him off. He's a fireman from Louisville. He's a retired fireman, and he wants to be kind of like a silent partner, but he don't want anything in return. All he wants to do is have us run benefit shows for his Relay for Life, and I've actually heard of people doing this, so it actually kind of made sense to me. Sure, let this guy come in, put some money in, help us paint the walls and all this stuff. And sure enough, within a week, we were down there painting the walls, and this guy was up on a ladder, hanging stuff up high. That he had his own real tall ladder, which has always been a problem for me because I'm afraid of heights, so I don't keep ladders around. But anyway, long story short, these guys had been friends for 15 years or more. Apparently, this guy was his ref way back when I ran him out of business, or he quit for personal reasons, whatever you want to say. And they started at this point kind of strong-arming me on decisions because it's two partners against one on everything, and no matter how ridiculous Matt's decision was, Billy Smith was always going to side with him. He was just a patsy. I think he ended up getting played kind of the same way as I did in this. And then the tragedy happened that really was the thing that broke me on this. I probably could have came out on top without ever having the downside of it if it wasn't for this, but I worked a third shift job, like I said, and I was on my way home from work, and I fell asleep driving a Jeep, and I flipped my Jeep 5 times, rolled down a hill, and just about tore my finger off, and I was in the hospital for a little while. And so at that point, Matt goes to the landlord of the building and pays the rent up for about 6 months in advance, and changes the locks on the doors and all this stuff. So I come in to book the show, and he gets mad because I'm there. He's like, "I could do this." And I'm like, "Well, you should have called me and told me that you were going to book the show, and I would have stayed home. But since I've already driven in, I'm going to book the show." And at that point, he got defensive. He got upset that I was there. And for the first time, he started sticking his nose into the booking. I booked a couple of matches, and he'd come back, and he's like, "Can I see you for a minute?" And every time I would book a match, he would come back and he would argue the match, no matter how much it made sense or what. And finally, I got tired of arguing with the two of them, and for that night only, I was going to go ahead and and let it go their way, and I let matches go their way. And then the following week was our annual big show that we had, Surviving the Steel, which we put a cage up for. It's kind of like a War Games match. It's a 8-man elimination match. And we always have another cage match, like semi-main and the main in the cage. And Matt decided that he didn't want to put the cage up during intermission. He wanted to put it up before the show and have every match in the cage, which is ridiculous because by the main event, people are tired of the cage, and everything that can be done in the cage has already been done. Plus, half the people that were booked on the show weren't in a storyline, so we had people who were wrestling each other in a steel cage that weren't in program with each other. So why would, for instance, I wrestled Live Wire on that match, and we hadn't wrestled each other for weeks before then, but why would I be in a cage with a Live Wire when neither one of us have an issue with each other? It just didn't make any sense. So, I mean, you can't send somebody to the ropes and just have a regular match because if they hit the ropes, they hit the cage. So, anyway, that didn't make any sense, and that was actually my last night there. At the end of the night, I told him that we were just going to leave. The company was going to leave, and he offered to buy my concession stand stuff, which amounted to a popcorn machine and like a heat well through a steam table. And he asked me how much I would take for it. I gave him the price. I believe it was like $300. So he wrote on a check concession stand stuff and other stuff. And I leave with that check. I cash the check. It was a good check. I come back to get the rest of my stuff, and basically his mom come to the door, and he stood behind his mom and told me that if I didn't leave, he was calling the cops. And he had taken on the return check and wrote lights, chairs, bleachers, belts, and basically at this point, roughly $10,000 worth of stuff, 13 years worth of stuff that I built up for, plus my own personal storage, because we had a storage room in that building that I rented for 8 years prior to that. We had a storage room in there, and I mean, I had collectibles. I had the very first Jerry Lawler action figure from WWE, still in package and autographed. I had a Greg the Hammer Valentine Legends of Wrestling action figure autographed, Coco Beware autographed. I had autographed pictures of Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson from back in the, back when I was a mark rather than a wrestler. And I had the Fabulous Ones pictures, and I mean, the list goes on and on. And I just had regular old personal storage that wasn't wrestling related, and my kids' stuff in there. And whatever they can get any money out of, they sold. And anyway, eventually he started running storylines. Every storyline was centered around some sort of sex or homosexuality. And while I understand that sometimes that's funny, but to have every single storyline on the show have somebody out there calling each other queer or whatever, it is bad. We went from running on average 100 people in the crowd, sometimes up over 200 on a weekly show, which people don't understand. A weekly show is a lot harder to draw than a monthly show, because a monthly show, that's the only time it's going to be there for a month. A weekly show, for good movies at the movies, well, I can go to wrestling next week, I'm going to the movies, so on and so forth for anything. But we were drawing good every week, and we watched their little internet show, and I mean, there was 12, 13 people in the crowd sometimes. I mean, you really could just walk around and count the people in the crowd and wouldn't hit 30 people on their good shows. So eventually they ended up not being able to make rent. They said they wanted to get out of the building because the landlord wouldn't fix anything, which unfortunately is true. The landlord was a friend of mine, even despite renting it to him while I was already renting it. He's still a friend of mine, but he wasn't a good landlord. He was, he just didn't have the business sense. But they moved out of there, and then the landlord called me and asked me if I wanted to come back in. And the very first week that I came back in, we packed the place, just on because when I left, he left, and Nick Noble left, Billy Mattern left. I ended up telling Billy Mattern to go back because at the time Billy Mattern wasn't 18 years old yet, so he couldn't wrestle in Kentucky. So this was an opportunity for Billy to wrestle. I'm like, if you want to wrestle, just go on back. Just if they talk about me, just let it go in one ear and out the other.
Right.
Yukon Mike left. I believe he went back for a couple of matches, but basically all the wrestlers that were any good. Fudd left, and he went to OVW, and unfortunately when we came back, he stayed with OVW. But, Rob Royale left. I don't know if I already mentioned him or not, but the first week we came back, all these wrestlers came back, and all the fans came back, and we had the place packed, and we had a plaque that hung on the wall that I tried to get 3 or 4 times while we were gone. That had our title history on there, and I mean, I know it's just a plaque that only costs like $115 or something like. It's not really a big deal, but I mean, it's just the history and the respect to the wrestlers that went in there. I mean, it's 13, 14 years at that point in time of of the champions, and it's got name. Coco Beware was a former champion, so to me, them breaking this black was spitting on Coco Beware,
Right.
you know, and Billy Maverick, they were spitting on him, but I mean, they just broke the plaque and threw it in the trash can. And the storage room, what they didn't sell, they poured. I'm guessing was just like garbage juice from a trash can all over. I mean, my kids' stuff from when my kid was born was in that room, and they had garbage juice. I mean, we had to throw it away because it was uncleanable. But anyway, that's the short story, believe it or not, on Matt Douglas. I could go on and on. During that period of time, though, while we were not in the building, he kind of formed a little partnership with Rick Brady, and me and Rick have since then kind of put things aside, but it made the situation tough for me and Rick Brady. And apparently, he kind of did the same thing with Rick Brady later on, and moved down to another company in Kentucky and did the same thing. And now he's in Tennessee. He won't do the same thing there because he's sleeping with the promoter, because he left his wife in Louisville. And I don't know if you've seen WDRB news lately, but his wife just is facing charges for sexually molesting one of her students.
Wow. You got any enemies?
I kind of burned up the time on that one.
Kind of Mad Douglas, but we won't go into all that. That's pretty.
I do got one more little story about Matt Douglas too.
Okay.
Me and him, and I think Rob Royale and Nick Noble were booked on a show in Wabash. The pay wasn't really great there, but it was a little bit of pay. And while, like I said, the crowd wasn't really good there, we always had a good time. If not just for the show, but the whole trip up there. We were all good friends. We goofed off. We did what wrestlers do on the road, you know. So we were booked on this show, and I'm sitting at home the day before, and BW3, Biff Wellington, his wife had committed suicide, and they were going to do a benefit show, a memorial for her, and apparently a wrestler by the name of Robbie Rotten was supposed to be booking this show. They were doing it out of that building, though, and Robbie contacts me on Facebook and says, "Hey, will you come up and do the Queen's show?" I think at this point it's a week before, maybe not the day before. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, me and Matt has an issue, but if you can clear it with Matt, I won't say a word to him while I'm there. If he don't say a word to me, I'll work the show out of respect for Biff, and and then I'll just, I'll leave and things can go back to normal. And then Jay Bly, Justin Turner, he sends me roughly the same message asking me if I'd work that show, and I tell him roughly the same thing. And both of them had copied and pasted Matt's response, which was, "Sure, tell Sean to come on down." By the way, for anybody who don't know, my shoot name is Sean. It says, "Tell Sean to come on down." So I call the guys in Wabash and cancel our booking up there. And me and Texas Outlaw and Rob Royale go to walk in, and Outlaw walks past him, and Rob Royale walks past him, and I'm bringing up the rear, and I go to walk past him, and his mom gets in front of me, and again, hiding behind his mom because he's brave. He comes up standing 4 feet behind his mom, and his mom's blocking the doorway, and he basically tells me if I don't leave, he's calling the cops. His big mistake was there were still fans coming in. So I don't know how many people's familiar with Madison, but if one fan hears it, they all hear it. As we were leaving, so was another 20 fans or whatever who were coming because Eric Draven posted on Facebook that he was going to be there, or Rob Royale posted on Facebook that he was going to be there, Texas Outlaw, or so on. Anyway, that shows what kind of character he has. He tells me that I can come to a show, a memorial show for one of our mutual friends, passed on wife, who was also a friend of mine. Granted, we had our hard times, me and Biff and his wife. We had our share of disagreements too, but everything always ended up good in the end. But to tell me that I can come there and then make a scene like that once I get there, that shows you what kind of character he is.
What guys in the business can you all call real friends?
This guy, basically, anything I ever need. There was a period of time where I didn't have a driver's license, and I could be way out where I live 20 miles from here and call him and say I need to ride 5 miles from my house, and he would be there. I bought this little scooter to get around, although I didn't have my license because I was close to getting my license back, and that thing broke down all the time. And no matter where I was, I can call him, and he would be there just right then. And I mean, that's what real friends do. And still to this day, there are times when we get shows outside of here, and you expect all the ring guys to kind of help with the ring crew and stuff. And some of them do every now and then. Most of them don't ever. The people you can count on to do it is Spaz when he's able, and Tom and me will always be the last one. The first one started, and the last one's there doing it. Spaz is one of my best friends. Nick Noble was my best friend for a long time. We don't hardly talk anymore. It's a shame. I think that has to do with a woman, not the story of a woman that you would think, but she just don't like me apparently. Yeah, she don't like anybody. Really, anybody that wrestles here. Morty Blankenship behind the scenes has become one of my best friends. The Blue Beetle, I'm not gonna tell you that. Johnny Justice, they call them the Seymour guys, those three. Off the top of my head, I know I'm missing a lot of them. Chris Caliber was a good friend of mine for a long time. He's got a family, and also I hardly see him anymore. Despite how much we bicker and how much I disagree with his wrestling decisions, Roger Blade has always been a good friend of mine. I know I'm missing people, and I apologize to anybody that I miss. Ricky Morton's a good friend of mine. He calls me on holidays and tells me, happy Thanksgiving and whatnot. For a long time, Jack Black and I were real good friends. I still have a lot of respect for him. We had a little disagreement on what real heat was and what bad heat was, and we don't really see eye to eye right now. Maybe that'll go away someday. Billy Mattern is a pretty good friend of mine. Utah Mike. I can go on and on about friends. Did you ask about him?
We done did that story.
In addition to Matt, because of the business end of wrestling as far as enemies goes, Cage Cutler and Christian Skyfire together. Separately, I don't think I would have any problem with Cage Cutler. I don't really know, but I kind of feel like together they were playing good cop, bad cop with me over some money that was owed to me and Outlaw and Spaz and Mitch Ellis and basically anybody else that's involved with this company.
What's your thoughts on hardcore wrestling, and what's been your bloodiest match?
Well, the bloodiest match I was in one of the Surviving Steels. I don't remember which year it was, but Pookie and Nick Noble bled buckets of blood. I mean, it was rolling down the ring apron. It was pretty bad. I bled a little in that match. My thoughts on hardcore, it's not for me. I enjoy to watch it every now and then, depending on who's in it. When I started out, I did what I called hardcore, but what I call hardcore is not what Ian Rotten or anybody of that caliber calls hardcore, but it is harder core than what some of the other guys would call hardcore. Because I mean, just swinging a chair to me is not hardcore. Or going through a table is not hardcore, because they were doing that before they called wrestling hardcore. But if you just go out and you're not actually working a match, you're just throwing gimmicks in the ring and hitting each other with it, that's hardcore. And to me, it's not wrestling. It's still entertaining, though.
It's pretty entertaining. Let's see. Other match, I've never actually. I had a hard way once. I took a bad spill over the top rope and smacked my leg on the apron.
But even that wasn't.
Caved my shin in. Yeah,
it
ran all the way down the leg.
So he usually gets more blood when he's here helping me at the arena doing stuff.
Yeah.
When we were downtown, it never failed. If I called him and asked him to help me with a project, he would go home bleeding somehow.
It's dedication. What do you feel is the biggest problem in the indies today?
Untrained wrestlers training wrestlers. I got some friends on this show, so I'm not going to mention the show by name. And I'm not talking about Christian Skyfire's show, but there is a show in the Clarksville area where I don't think anybody on the whole show has any training. They run a weekly show. They apparently draw pretty good because they're still there. Or maybe they don't run a weekly show. I don't know. I don't keep up with them. I've watched a few of their videos, and there's a couple of guys there who look like if they had some guidance, could really go somewhere in the business. And there's a couple of guys there that looks like maybe they should be buying the tickets instead of selling the tickets. People not wearing wrestling gear, people not understanding, and this isn't just that show, this is back to problems all over the indies. People not understanding the order of the match is like you'll go out and you'll see a match that has all these high spots in it, and that's first, and that's fine because that's to get the crowd going. Then you see the second match, we're out there for 25 or 30 minutes, and they're doing all these high spots. Well, your second match kind of be just a short match. I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be good, but you shouldn't be topping what your main event guys are going to do, because then the fans sit there all night long and they get let down on the end, and you want them to remember the main event, and instead of the early on matches. I feel like nowadays everybody is, what can I do for me to look better, rather than what can I do to make the show look better. The entire show needs to be, an event, a spectacle, not just one wrestler.
What's been y'all's favorite moment in the ring? You have one favorite moment.
Early on, I was in a battle royal with Jerry Lawler, and I got punched in the mouth. I still got scar. He didn't shoot on me. It wasn't his fault. I stepped into the punch. That's over 20 years ago. But he was my favorite wrestler growing up. I mean, he still is my favorite wrestler. If I watched wrestling, which I don't watch wrestling anymore, I would only watch it to see Jerry Lawler. I watch YouTube matches now. If I watch wrestling, it took place in the 80s, and it's usually Jerry Lawler. That's probably my favorite, just because it was the first time that I got wowed by somebody that that I grew up watching. My first big match, I was pretty young, pretty green. Me and Brandon Hunter was actually just there as ring crew, and the Rock and Roll Express, while they were still a big name, was there, and their opponents. I'm not going to mention their names because I respect them, but they showed up a little inebriated, and so me and Brandon Hunter were put in place of them, and we ended up working at Rock and Roll Express several times over the next few months, and that was a big deal, and kind of impressive that after I left there and went on and kind of did my own thing, then I brought Ricky up here 10 years after the fact. He still remembered me, and I mean, for Ricky to remember me was a whole lot bigger than me remembering that, because that was a big deal to me. For Ricky, it was probably just another match, but for him to remember me, at least tells me that I was either really good or really bad.
Yeah.
I'd say probably teaming up Dutch Mantel against Vito and Draven.
Is there anybody you've had to ever shoot on in the ring?
This list, basically any show that I've ever been on outside of AWA Supreme that Nick Noble was on, I had to shoot on somebody. For instance, we went to Wabash, and we were put in it was me and Nick Noble against, I can't remember the other team, the babyface team's name, and the heel team. I can't remember both of their names. One of them went by Kid Casanova, I believe, and the promoter said, just go out there and do what you got to do to get a heat. So the other teams are wrestling, and we're waiting for a tag. We're sitting there for a long time watching the babyface team do all these flips and all this stuff, and the heels basically, instead of giving heat, they're taking the heat. They're getting beat up by these babies over and over and over. Finally, one of the babies comes over, and for no reason at all tags us. It didn't have any logic why they would be diving to make the tag, since they've been doing all these flashy moves. But Noble comes in, and Casanova stands up, and Noble just walks up to him and just slaps him in the face. And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a shoot or anything like that. It was just an open hand smack, and anybody who's ever been in wrestling, or at least properly trained and wrestled properly trained people, knows that an open hand slap is going to be an open hand slap. I mean, you just don't pull that. You really open hand slap him. So he slaps the guy, and the guy gets mad, thinks he's getting shot on. So he immediately tags in his partner, and then they both try to beat up my partner. Of course, these guys weigh 180 pounds, and Nick Noble weighs 320. So they're trying to hit him. I realize from the ring apron that these guys are really hitting, so I jump in and I grab that Casanova. I reach my hand around his face, and I hook my finger in his mouth, and I yank him to the ground. And as I'm going to the ground, I put my forearm about an inch away from his face. So as soon as his head hits the ground, the side with my finger in his mouth, then my forearm lands across his face. And I look out of the corner of my eye and see Nick Noble just pummeling this other guy in the corner. And I position that guy's head so I can see what's going on over there. I said, you got two choices. You can either do what they're doing, or we can get up and wrestle. And he looks at me and he says, I want to wrestle. So I pick him up, I send him in the ropes, I put him in a sleeper, and while Nick Noble and this guy's partner are over there slugging it out in the corner, we're in the middle of the ring with a sleeper on. And about, I don't know, a couple of years prior to that, we went down to Glensboro, Kentucky. Salt River Wrestling it was at the time. I don't think it's still in business. We were putting in a tag match. We got there kind of late, so we kind of just got whoever was left over with a tag match. And bigger guy, I don't remember names here, it's been a while. So bigger guy comes up and he's telling us what all he can do, and we're trying to lay out a match. And the little guy comes over. He's like, "What do you want me to do?" And I'm like, "Well, how about you start out? We'll do the Memphis spot, you know, the hip toss, the arm drag, and the drop kick, and then you go back, and he's like, I don't know how to do it. I'm like, well, we'll skip the hip toss. We'll just go arm drag, clothesline, or something like that. He's like, I don't know how to do arm drag. I'm like, how about you stand on the apron and we work your partner? And he's like, all right. So we're doing that. The little guy's not tagging in. I tag in Nick Noble, and the big guy goes over and tags in the little guy. And he comes running in, and he jumps at Nick Noble and hits him with a forearm, and he hits him with a forearm in the face. And so Noble grabs him and sends him the ropes and gives him a clothesline across the face, and it sounded like a chop. I mean, it was like, bam, right across his face. And the other guy starts to come in the ring, so I step forward to the ring. He just kind of stays on the ring apron. So actually, that time I didn't have to shoot on anybody. There was one time that wasn't actually part of the show. I had gotten hit by a garbage truck a few weeks before, so my back was all messed up, and I thought I was done wrestling forever, so I was just going to promote. And I actually lived in an apartment right in front of the wrestling building, so which was convenient because I'm forgetful. So we were recording. We were running out of batteries, and I would go over to my apartment. This guy stopped me and said, hey, I want to be on the show tonight. I'm like, well, I'll talk to you here in a little bit. Maybe you can have a tryout afterwards. He's like, no, I want to be on the show tonight. And I'm like, well, maybe I can find a spot for you. Who were you trained by? He goes, it's never trained, but I watch a lot of wrestling. I'm like, no, you come back next week and get some training, and after you get some training, we'll put you on the card. And I go. And then he stops me on my way back in with the battery. He's like, come on, man, let me have a match. And you got to understand, this was my kids and I didn't really see each other much. Me and my ex-wife didn't get along, so there was like a 10-year gap between me and seeing my kids. And this was actually the first weekend that I had my oldest two kids. My youngest kids live with me, and I see them every day, but my oldest two were like 10 and 11. It's the first time I'd seen them. And this guy seemed like maybe he was on methamphetamine or something. I mean, he was stopping me. It ended up he was stopping me about every 5 minutes throughout the night. He probably stopped me 100 times. And the main event's on, and I had to go back over to my apartment to get something. And Damien Devine's in the ring, and I don't know if you know Damien, but he's about 6'6" and every bit of 450 pounds. And he's not your big 450-pounder that can't move. He can move if he needs to. He's a deputy sheriff in Bartholomew County or something like that. And he knows a lot of shoot wrestling holds. He's a shoot wrestler and a freestyle wrestler in high school, so he knows his way around the ring, both working and shooting. So I'm on my way over there, and this guy stops me again, and this is probably the 100th time he stopped me. He says, tell you what, you give me a tryout, I'll get in the ring with anybody, even that big fucking Damien Devine right there. I'm like, stand right there. I'm going to go get you a waiver. So instead of going straight to the door that goes to the dressing room, I cut out and go by the ring, because Damien's standing, he's working the crowd, he's standing right there, and I kind of whisper in his ear, like, don't wear yourself out, I got something for you to do after the show. So I go back to the dressing room, and I open the door up and get the waiver out, and by the time I have the waiver in my hand, I hear the bell ring, and Damien has already pinned his opponent, because he already knew what was going on. So you can actually look this up on YouTube, by the way. It's a backyarder challenge. So I pull the waiver out, and Damien comes in there, and I tell Damien, I'm like, I'm going to put you in the ring with this guy. I don't want you to hit him. I don't want you to do anything that's really going to hurt him. I just want you to put him in a hold and make him tap out so he'll leave us alone. Damien's like, all right, I can do that. So we get the guy signing the waiver. We actually recorded him signing the waiver with a camcorder so that he wasn't lying about his name. We focused in on his driver's license and everything. So, nobody could say that anything that we did wasn't on the up and up, And he gets in the ring with Damien. This guy weighs 170 pounds, and Damien weighs, like I said, around 450 or so. And Damien grabs his arm, puts it over his head, like a key lock hold or something like that, and the guy taps out. Nothing, And he sits up and catches his breath for a little bit, and then he says, if I had somebody closer to my size, I could have taken him like that. And like I said, by this point, I'm already aggravated as could be with this guy. And I said, how much you weigh? He says, I can't remember for sure, but I know he was a little more than me at the time. It's like 172 pounds. And now I weigh 210 right now, but at the time, I said I've been hit by a garbage truck, and I've lost a lot of weight. My back was all out of whack. I weighed 168 pounds. I'm like, I weigh 168. And he's like, come on. He gives me the rock motion to come on. So I get up and I get in the ring with him, and I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and warn you. I'm not going to put you in a hold like Damien did. I'm going to strike you. He's like, what's that mean? I'm going to punch you in the fucking face. So he comes in at me, and I grab him by his ear, and I yank him to the ground, and I put my knee on his chin, and I'm just doing ground and pound. I'm hitting him. He starts tapping out after about 5 or 6 hits, and I ended up hitting him like 13, 14 times before I realized he was tapping out. But, other than those few instances, and, one time here and there hitting somebody to kind of get them in check if they're messing up. There's one more, I guess. In Harlan, Kentucky, I was wrestling a guy. he was huge. I mean, he looked like Lex Luger back in the day, kind of huge. And I do this punch where I hit my arm and I punch, and it makes a big slapping sound, you know. And this guy wasn't really that much of a wrestler. He was kind of new to wrestling, but he looked like he'd been wrestling for years. And so it was me, Spaz, and Roger Blade against two really big guys and another guy. I remember the other guy's name was Kenny Shell. I don't remember the two big guys' names off the top of my head. Spaz tags me in, I jump over the rope, and I do that big punch, and they got slapping sound. And I mean, it sounds like a chop or something, you know. And the guy, and the place is packed, and the guy yells loud. He's like, "That was fucking stiff." So I started just kind of lobbing punches in there, just barely, just throwing them in there. And as we're going back towards the corner, and he says, "Stiff me again and see what happens." So, I mean, at this point, I've been wrestling for 15 years, you know. And I mean, I'm at 22 now, so I mean, maybe it was only 12 or so at the time. I don't know. It was probably 10 years ago. So I pulled back and I hit him as hard as I can in the mouth. And what happened is he leaned into the corner, sat down, sat there for a minute, tagged out, and never got tagged back into the rest of the match. He comes up to me in the dressing room. He's like, "Hey man, I don't know what got into me out there. I apologize." And, you know, so other than one punch here and there, not really. I mean, I never really got into anything that was bad.
What about you?
I'm never going to shoot on
Never.
anybody. I've had to dish out a little tough love, but I don't think anybody wants me to shoot on them.
Is there any guys from the Indies that y'all would like to work with that you haven't?
I'd like to work a match with Isaiah. I've booked him before, and I think me and him would have a good match. Really, if there's guys that I want to work with, since I'm on the show, I just call it off. But I mean, I don't keep up with a whole lot of other things. I don't watch wrestling anymore. Mostly our talent is homegrown talent. Almost everybody on the roster I train. I don't like to use the wrestlers that are wrestling everywhere else because they end up, there's two problems with it. One, people can go somewhere else and see them, so they don't feel like they need to come here. And number two is, if I got a guy that I can book 4 weeks out of the month, then I can put him in a storyline. If I got a guy who wants to wrestle in his hometown on a monthly show, then I got him 3 weeks out of the month. I can put him in a storyline, but maybe not as good as one as 4 weeks. But then that guy picks up another show somewhere, like say wrestles for Hoosier Pro on the first Saturday of every month, like Ricky Ruckus did for a long time. I still got him 3 weeks, so I can still build something, and the week he's not there, his opponent can just talk about him on the microphone. But then you put another week in there, then I've only got him half the time, so the storyline quality goes down. If he gets another show, then I've only got him 1 out of 4, which means basically every time he's here, just put somebody over. So as far as other indies, if they wrestle regularly other places, it's not really worth my time to bring them in. It's not worth their time to come in.
Well, I'd probably, there's a lot of guys I'd like to work. I just don't think it's ever going to happen. But I mean, I'd like to work Josephus. I don't know if you know who that is. It's the guy. It's almost.
He looks like Bruce Brody.
Oh,
Brody,
yeah, I know you're talking about.
I think we could probably have some good matches there.
I agree. That would probably be good because his gimmick being so much like Stan Hansen and his
Yeah, it would be cool, yeah.
like Bruce Brody. It'd be good stuff.
I'm taking a crack at Conway, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
What do you like and dislike the most about the wrestling business?
I like anything that took place 1990 and before. Any wrestling show that I go to that I see people still use real heels and real baby faces, and by that I mean the heels actually do something to get heat. I mean, if the heel's not scared of the baby, then he's not doing something to get heat. If the heel's scared of the baby and he uses a weapon to get an advantage, that's getting heat. But if he uses a weapon after he's already got the advantage, well, then that's what I would do in an actual fight. If I was fighting somebody, and there's a brick there, I'm going to hit him with that brick. But basically, the problem with why I quit watching WWE is there's no difference between the babies and heels anymore. And the same thing with TNA. I don't like that nobody sells moves anymore. I don't like that modern wrestlers wear wrestling. I call them wrestling tights, but they're not tight. I think the reason why when the people who laid the ground for us wore wrestling tights and they were tight is because it gave you a facade that you were like a superhero. I mean, Superman's tights are tight, Batman's tights are tight, my tights are tight. But you see somebody wearing spandex pants that are 3 sizes too big because they're afraid that they're going to look funny wearing wrestling tights. Well, if you're afraid to look funny, get out of our business. What I don't like about, even on our show, I hate to say it, is you get people that are around each other too much sometimes, and something that could be really small becomes real big. So, and you know, one person hears a story, then he tells another person a story, and he tells another person a story, then his girlfriend, who's not even part of the show, hears it, and she calls somebody and tells them, and sooner or later, you know, it's the old mountain out of the molehill. What I do like about the business is I like entertaining the fans. I like knowing that me or my guys on my roster can come out there and tell the story they want to tell. And while people who don't know us as well might say, "Oh, that'll never work," and if we go out there and do it and it works, I like that. I like the reaction that the crowd gives us each and every week. I like the friends that I made. I know a lot of people say you never really make friends in the wrestling business, but I think you do. Matter of fact, I can't name but one or two friends that aren't in the wrestling business.
I'm pretty much anything pre-2001. Probably the lack of respect. You know, there's just an ungodly amount of disrespect in this business, and it shouldn't be. I mean, we're all on pretty much the same team, so we got to get along.
Right.
Got to get out.
Yeah. Who are some guys you all looked up to before y'all got in the business?
Jerry Lawler, I've already said that over and over. Rock and Roll Express. Basically anybody that wrestled Memphis territory.
Right.
You know, I really liked. I like Bachwinkle, Flair, Randy Savage. I was never a big fan of Hulk Hogan, but before he started getting way too old, when I look back, I'm like, what he was doing, even though he wasn't doing a lot of moves, was the right thing to be doing. I don't know. I would say probably Lawler, Dundee, Bachwinkle, Kurt Hennig, and Flair, probably my favorites, or the ones that I looked up to and idolized the most. I kind of modeled myself, I think, out of a mix between Eddie Gilbert and Randy Savage.
Pretty much most of the legends.
Yeah.
I can just sum it up that way.
Do y'all have a favorite road story?
I can't really tell. I'll get in trouble.
Well, let's see. I don't know if I have a favorite road story, but anytime you're on the road with this guy's going to be, just getting there is going to be something, because if he makes a wrong turn and he needs a road to switch around, he'll make his own road. We passed up a gas station, and his daughter was riding with us, and she said she needed to use the restroom. There wasn't another store in sight, so we passed up the entrance to it. He just turns and goes through a ditch, and I mean, it is a deep ditch, and ruts all over the place. And well, she got to go to the bathroom. And then one time, I think it was the first time we went to Wabash, we were on the way there, and we took a left, and we took a right on the interstate, and there was a grass median, and there was a cop sitting there with somebody pulled over, and he U-turns through the grass median right in front of that cop, and just kicks it back the way we were trying to go. But I mean, we didn't get pulled over or anything, so it all worked out. All in all, I don't drink or engage in any of that kind of stuff, so my road stories are pretty basically sober road stories. So all the crazy stuff that you hear from a lot of people didn't really happen. I know the first time that me and Brandon Hunter wrestled in Peru, we were leaving, we pulled up at a gas station. We had been followed all the way from the show by some rats. And I'm sitting there, he's pumping gas. I went to the store and got us some drinks. I'm coming out of the store, and these girls popped out of that car and raised their shirts up, and that was a good evening. We couldn't go any further with that, though, because his wife was with us. So he's since been divorced or married differently. So in case they're watching, it wasn't his current wife.
I'll just say the diddle. Hands on the roof.
All right, we're going to talk about some other companies around this area, and you guys just tell me what y'all think about them. Okay. The first one is D1W.
Early on, I would have had a totally different opinion of them. I know they do good business. I know they do a lot of charities. I don't really have anything bad to say about Rick anymore. It started out pretty rocky because I barely even knew who he was, and he was teaming up with Matt Douglas, and while Matt Douglas was teaming up with him, I would have ran him on the ground when you asked me this question. We had some heat. He said the reason why he didn't like me to begin with is because he came to my show, worked my show, and I didn't shake his hand. And anybody that's ever known me knows I can hate you and I will shake your hand in the dressing room. If I didn't shake, I'm not saying I didn't shake his hand because it could have happened, but you got to understand, I do my own advertising, I do my own booking, I take care of my own concession stand, I work on the card, and this is a learning company, so all my guys for the most part are either green or have just passed that stage of being green, so I'm still laying out matches for other people. So if he got there past time that the doors open and he left before the show was over, there's a good chance I didn't know he was either coming in or leaving, and maybe I didn't shake his hand. And so we had a lot of heat then. Now I think everything's pretty kosher between me and Rick. I can't judge the quality of the show because I've never seen one.
I've never seen their show either. I've seen a couple spot matches here or there, but I've never worked for them. Probably never will.
What about Evolution Pro Wrestling?
I think the promoters are jokes. Christian Skyfire. When it started out, XCW had rented my ring for a show, and this was Danny Walker. He ran into some financial problems, and he didn't pay me for my ring. I was nice enough to let my ring go without my money in advance. I told him good deal. I think Danny Walker was $125. Danny calls me and says there's a problem. I don't have the money, but I'll get you taken care of. A couple weeks passed, and I keep calling him, and now his phone's disconnected. So I'm thinking he's going to stiff me on the pay. Danny did get me taken care of. I did have to drive Clarksville to get it, but I think he would have come and given it to me if I would have waited on it a little longer. But Danny really did have some real financial troubles, and at one time it was okay. Then Christian Skyfire says, hey, we took Danny's company over, changed the name to Evolution Pro Wrestling, can we rent the ring from you? And I said, I'll tell you a deal. If I don't have to touch the ring, I don't have to tear it down, I don't have to help set it up, I'll send one of my guys down with you to make sure you guys are setting it up right. You pay me $75 and him $25. You're paying him $25 because I work at 5 o'clock in the morning the next morning, and when you bring the ring back, I don't want to have to be at the building to open the door. So you're not paying the guy $25 to be ring crew. You're paying the guy $25 to stay up late enough to let you in the building to set the ring back up. It's a pretty good deal, though, a wrestling ring for $100. So, I mean, because up until Spider Murphy got his ring, you call around and ask anybody about a wrestling ring, it's going to be $300 or so. And this was a brand new ring at the time. And so, yeah, that's a good deal. We could do that. So they come up, they get the ring, they go down there, they don't draw. First show, I didn't expect them to draw. They paid some of their wrestlers. Apparently they didn't pay Apollo or maybe a few other wrestlers. But they didn't pay me at all. So, I mean, I don't know if they paid him on the first one or not. I don't.
The first one they gave me like $15.
Yeah, so, okay, they almost paid him, and they didn't pay me anything. They called me up a couple weeks before their next show, asked if they can get the ring. And I'm like, well, you still owe me money. They're like, well, we'll get you taken care of after the show, man, I promise. And I'm an easygoing guy. I take a long time to get out of sorts. So, sure, I let them do it again. And again, $35 I think they brought me this time. So at this point, we're up to, the actual ring rental was $100. 75 for me and 25 for him, and I think 35 to me and 15 to him is what they paid so far by the second ring rental. So we're talking $150 down. The third time, I think maybe he didn't go and Mitch Ellis went or something because I had it figured at 225 as to what they were down. And at this point, I was done renting to him at 225. And Skyfire calls me and says, I will meet you at your wrestling building. This was on a Tuesday, I believe it was. No, it was on a Friday night because my wife and I was going to this thing. It was actually how we ended up getting baptized, by going to one of these events at the church that we go to, and we were going to go together. It was kind of a nostalgia for our relationship kind of thing. And it was really important to my wife that we went together, so we were going to go to that. And so I told Christian to make sure he was there at the wrestling building at 4 o'clock. At this time, like I said, I lived about 30 miles from here. So I come here and I wait. And no Christian Skyfire, so I call him, and he's like, man, I'm in Shepherdsville at my grandma's house. I'm like, well, I'm going to go home there. And you call me when you leave there. I'm like, is Scottsburg closer or is Madison closer? He says, Scottsburg's closer. I'm like, well, then I'll meet you at Scottsburg Walmart when you're ready. So I'm at home, finally my phone rings. It's like 5 o'clock in the evening at this point. My wife's already getting ready to go to this thing at the church. So he's like, hey, brother, I'm getting ready to head up that way. I'm like, all right, well, then I'll meet you at Walmart in Scottsburg. And I leave to go to Walmart in Scottsburg. My wife's mad at this point, but $225 is important. So she goes ahead and goes to the church thinking I'm going to meet her there once he gets there. Well, I'm walking around Walmart. I'm buying the stuff at the concession stand for my show at this point. And I'm just going to wait for him to get here to pay for my concession stand stuff so I can use that money to pay for my stuff. And I wait and I wait and I wait, and he's not there. So I start texting him, no answer. So I call him, no answer. So I wait a little longer. I get tired of waiting, so I pay for my stuff, and I leave, and I go home, and I open up the internet, and he's on Facebook. So I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm in Oklahoma at my grandma's house. I'm like, Oklahoma? Didn't you say your grandma was in Shepherdsville? Did she move in the last 2 hours? And he's like, brother, I'm just trying to do some chores for her because she can't do stuff. I'm mowing the yard. I'm like, you're mowing the yard at dark, and you're on Facebook. How does this not make any sense to me? You know? And he keeps coming up with excuses and excuses. And I ask him, and I still got all these text messages. I'll be glad to show anybody that thinks I'm lying. I actually posted them on his wall, and he ended up deleting them, but not before a few people seen them. I said, how can you justify paying the wrestlers? And don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not saying you shouldn't be paid, but how can you justify paying the wrestlers who aren't selling tickets to your show when you can't pay for the guy that has the ring? He says, well, brother, I'm trying to pay everybody at the same time. I'm like, well, how come this guy gets paid and this guy gets paid, but I'm furnishing the ring and my hand is empty? And he said, brother, I'll get you taken care of, I promise. I'm like, all right, I'll give you another chance. Just tell me where we can meet. And in the meantime, somebody has a show going on in New Albany coming up soon, and they have Skyfire and Cutler booked on it. So I call them and tell them I'm coming to that show to get my money. What happened is I got booked on that show against them. I think it was both of us booked against them. And I'm halfway down there, and I call him to remind him I'm coming to bring my money. And he says, brother, I'm at my family reunion in Beaver Creek. Really? You didn't know about your family reunion yesterday when you told me that you were going to be there with my money? I'm like, if you don't got my money, tell me you don't got my money. Stop lying to me. Stop making me break dates with my wife and spend time away from my family to come down and collect money. I'm spending $50 to get down here. He spent more because he drives a big truck. I'm spending all this money to get down here to a show that I'm supposed to be on with you. Right. And granted, if I didn't get my money and we got in the ring with him, I was going to take my money out of his ass. But he no-showed me, and all this time I hadn't even talked to Cutler. So I get home, and I didn't even have Cutler's number. I looked his number up on Facebook, and I looked up Cutler's number, and I called him. And Cutler, he's like, man, I didn't know we were this far down to you. He's like, I'll get you taken care of. And sure enough, within an hour, Skyfire was at a gas station, meet me at a gas station in Scottsburg with part of my money. But it was enough to keep me quiet for a while. So they won't rent the ring again coming up on a show they got. And I'm like, well, if you pay me what you owe me before the ring leaves, then sure. All right, so they come up, and this is the only time that they did good by me, I think. They had started selling sponsorship for like a little handout to be like a program. And they come up and they gave me, I think they gave me $75 at the gas station. They gave me $150 then, so I put it at $225, which means they owe me $75 at the end of the show. They took the ring. They had their show. They bring the ring back. Actually, they didn't bring the ring back. They brought the ring back a day late, and no money. And then we put the canvas on there, and there's holes in the canvas. I mean, it's a brand new canvas. There's been no hardcore in it or anything. And it's not a canvas. It's vinyl for on the ring. They put holes in it. And ring poles are all scratched up and whatnot. So I call them and complain about this. But we'll buy you a new canvas. Well, they've never bought me a new canvas. So they paid him like $10. They didn't pay me anything. So the next show comes up, and like a fool, I let the ring go one more time. I think this one was the last one. I'm not sure. It could have been a couple more. I don't know. And this time the ring comes back 11 holes in the floor. So I have to go. I call Mike Samples, the guy who we bought the ring from. I call him, and I'm like, what can I do about these holes in the floor? I'm like, because these guys that tore it up say they're going to buy me a new floor, a new canvas, but I don't think they're going to. He said, well, you can go to get a swimming pool repair kit, and you can put one of those on there, and that'll hold it over for a while. So I go buy one. I buy one. I put one on there. It's $45 for one. I put it. I use it all. I have to go buy another one. So we're talking $90 worth of vinyl floor repair, And I call these guys. I'm like, I just spent $90 preparing this ring. I'm like, I'm not going to make you buy me a new floor cover because I know you can't. But I want my $90 that I spent on this. Sure, brother, we'll get it to you. Next time they had a show, coming up, I had told somebody, I was like, if I don't have every dime they owe me, my ring's not going anywhere. Well, this got back to them, except it got twisted a little bit. And what they heard was, I want my money, and then they're going to show up, and I'm still not going to rent the ring to them, which is a good idea. I wish I would have done it, but that wasn't my idea. My idea was my money, plus the show that they're doing up front, and then the ring can go. Well, they ended up going with a different ring, and then eventually they bought a ring, which I don't know how they could buy a ring, and they still owe me money. And from what I hear, they say that they're all caught up on the ring rentals, but by my book, I think they still owe me roughly $250.
What about the IWA Mid-South?
I worked PW, IWA, AWA show with them. I know a lot of people don't like him, right? Like I said, his idea of hardcore and my idea of hardcore, two different things. I know he gets a good crowd. When I first started running shows, I ran regular wrestling shows. He ran hardcore wrestling shows. I used to watch his shows because it was something different than I do. I don't really got anything bad to say about him. I rented the ring to him because he was in a pinch one time, and he came up. He said, "Do a show for me for free if I rented the ring to him in that pinch," and I did. That's how I know our idea of hardcore is different, because I told him no hardcore, and he said, "Okay, no hardcore," and he did the cactus jack elbow drop on the bleachers to a guy, and hit a guy with a couple of chairs, and broke a couple of chairs that weren't mine that I had to pay for. But I mean, all in all, I know that if Ian Rotten comes to the show and doesn't hit somebody with a chair, then he's going to get booed out of the place. So he did what he had to do.
All right, I'm gonna name some guys off to you, and y'all just tell me what y'all think about them. All right. The first one is Ricky Morton.
I get nothing but love for Ricky. He's probably the most professional star that you can book for that price range. I mean, I'm not going to say what I get him for because it's probably less than a lot of people get him for, but I get him for a very reasonable amount. He'll come out and he'll perform. He'll take bumps, which is one thing most legends won't do. And he's great to be with in the dressing room. He's always telling stories. If he's not telling stories of things that can help people out in their career, he's telling jokes that brings up the morale. He compliments people. He tells them in a nice way what they can do better. He's true legend.
Rob Conway.
Nothing but respect for Rob. We were at OVW at the same time. I actually wrestled a few years before going to OVW, so I've been in business a little longer than him. Obviously, he's done a little more than me. And I know he just won the NWA World Championship back, and I'm proud of that. I think, I'm not sure that it's 100% accurate, but I think I'm somewhere around the first person in 14 years to be in Indiana, because I've been on May 9th. But I probably have a better relationship with Rob than I have with any other guy that's been, where Rob's been.
Yeah.
Really good guy. Knows his stuff.
Now, you've had Shark Boy up here a few times, right?
I've had Shark Boy, I think, 3 times.
Let's talk about Shark Boy.
I've known Shark Boy for a long time, before his gimmick really took off. I mean, I don't know for sure how much he was getting paid, but I'm guessing back when he was a $30 wrestler.
Yeah.
Then, he took off and all this. And he's a really great wrestler. Sometimes I feel like maybe something's on his mind. The first time we had him, he was a blast. He was great in the back. He was great in front of the crowd. He was real personable to the crowd. Second time, same thing. The third time, he had some really bad weather that he had to go through. And I don't know, something was on his mind. He sat in the back in the corner on his phone the whole time because they texted him. He was not very nice to some of the fans. So I heard. I didn't see firsthand that he wasn't nice to the fans. I will say his match that night was with Billy Mattern, and they had a very good match. Very good match. But he just wasn't very personable in the dressing room. So that's about it.
Matt Atreya.
When I met Matt, he was the first person that I ever said I couldn't have a good match with. He wouldn't listen. He was green and he thought he knew everything. He was stiff on things that shouldn't be stiff, and he was too light on things that shouldn't be light. He was awful, terrible. So every time I saw it, if I was ever in the ring with him, if there was ever a need that I had to be his opponent, all I did was chop him. I chopped him repeatedly. It got to the point to where it didn't even stay in the ring. We'd be in the dressing room and I would chop him just because he's Matt Atreya. And this went on for a long time, and then he was gone. I hadn't seen him for a long time. we went to a show in Seymour, and it was more like a party that there happened to be wrestling at. It wasn't really like a buy a ticket for a wrestling show event. But he was on it, and I was leaving after my match because my kids were with me late at night. But while I was waiting for my pay, I was standing ringside and watching Matt Trey's match, and he had a good match with a guy who's a turd. So Jesse Watson was off. So he had good training though. But anyway, Matt had a really good match with Jesse Watson, and so I called Matt up, and I'm like, hey, look, I used to think you were awful. My opinion has kind of changed. I do think that he doesn't know. He's like WWE. He doesn't know the difference between a baby and a heel. One thing that if I was Matt that I would change is he does really big moves at a point when people shouldn't be watching him. For instance, we had a 6 or 8 man tag going on. There was action in the ring, and he picks up an opponent ringside and power bombs him onto the ring apron, which is something you want everybody to see. But there's people in the ring doing stuff, and people are focused on that. So maybe 6 people out of the whole arena saw that power bomb on the ring apron, and I'm betting 3 of them were wrestlers. But I mean, other than that, I mean, he's a good guy. He's hilarious, and he has come a long way in the way of doing wrestling.
I agree. He's come a long way. And I think he broke in like 6 months before I did.
Somewhere around in there.
Bobo Brazil Jr.
I worked Bobo back when he actually moved a little faster. He's gotten up there in the age. I believe he's had a stroke or 2 now. Back then, for a man his size, he was phenomenal. He's still, you don't want to be in there if he's mad because he's going to get chopped like he stole something. I love him to death. He's hilarious. He's kind of hard to understand when he talks sometimes. Sometimes he tells stories of the olden days. I feel like maybe he stretches the truth just a little bit. But I mean, we all do. His wife, Mama Deb, she's hilarious too. She scares me when she's at ringside though because she gets a little too close to the action sometimes. But other than that, you know, he's great. Easy to work with.
He's a great guy. Can't say anything bad about him at all. And I think he was like one of the first promoters to ever pay you anyway.
If you could work with one guy from any era, who would it be?
I think from a learning aspect, I would say Nick Bockwinkel. Bockwinkel, Flair, or Eddie Gilbert in their earlier days. I think I've learned most of how to make myself better. I mean, there's other people that can teach me things I don't know. I'm not saying anything like that, but Bockwinkel, my weakest point is I've strayed from chain wrestling. I don't do much chain wrestling because I feel like it bores the fans. People who do a lot of chain wrestling, I think, are doing it to entertain the other wrestlers. Bockwinkel's great at that, so I think he would bring in what I need to tighten things up a little bit for myself. Eddie Gilbert, because his character is what I modeled myself after, so I kind of feel like maybe I would see what I'm missing on that.
This is hard to nail one down. Is this like with or against or either or?
Yeah, either or.
With, I've already worked with Dutch Mantel. I'm sure it would be a good match if I worked him, but I like to work guys more my size. That way I have a better big man match. I mean, I can work a lot better. I mean, I can still work. I can just work better.
What's the most heat y'all have ever received?
I guess this wasn't me personally, but me and Brandon Hunter wrestled in Evansville before CCW was there. I mean, this is back when USWA was still there. And Brandon Hunter wore a rebel flag mask, and I mean, he wasn't racist or anything. It was gimmick. He called himself the rebel. Actually, he called himself the young rebel. I used to tease him about it all the time. I say, "What you gonna do when you get old? You still gonna be the young rebel?" And he ended up changing his name to the Rebel. But anyway, I drove a 68 Chevelle at the time. We were leaving. We had worked each other. I was already in the car. Luckily, back in the window, so people didn't see that we were riding together. But he's in the car. He's carrying his bag. He popped the trunk. The trunk was already open for him. And he puts his bag in the trunk and he closes it. And these black guys start running towards him. And one of them's got a brick. He pulls back and he throws it. And he he ducks behind the car. The brick hits the back window. He opens up the car door and we get in and take off. But, you know, we got our window busted. And one time we were at a fairgrounds, I believe. I think it was in Rising Sun, but I'm not sure. And they sold beer at the show, beer in bottles. And I was fifth or sixth match, which gave everybody good enough time to be drunk, and people started throwing bottles in the ring at us. So that was pretty rough. But, I mean, I get good heat too. I mean, every time I feel like if I'm a heel, I get what I call good heat is where you make the crowd mad enough that they want to see you get beat up, but not mad enough they want to leave.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm not trying to brag, but I feel like I get that anytime I go out there. So,
I'd say the most I've ever gotten is we formed a little bit of road faction, and we were VIPs, and it was in Sims, and it was him, me, Noble, Royal, Mattern,
and you got
Mike, and we pretty much come in and was like forcing ourselves on this organization, and we'd already beat up like half the roster, and come the main event, we got 4 guys together and had one guy in the center of the ring, and we all just threw him about, I don't know, 10 feet in the air or something like
Did he
that.
land on a
This
this
wasn't no little guy. This guy was at least your size, and we just threw him in the air, and the crowd was chasing us to the back.
And this was the other guys in the faction, because the big guy that was on their team, they bumped him coming into the ring, but I was on the ground behind him, and when they bumped him, he landed on my leg, and I couldn't move to save my life. And this is actually kind of funny, because there was this kid that the company had fired before the show, but these guys were his friends. And they fired him, I think, because he couldn't separate wrestling from real life. And this is a good example of it. He'd been fired. He was gone. I mean, shoot, fired.
Yeah.
And he comes to the ring, hits the ring. Rob Royale never met the guy before in his life. Rob Royale, if you don't know him, he's actually going to have a bench press record, 615 pounds for 240 pounders. So you don't want to hit the ring on this guy.
No.
He don't know who he is. The guy comes in, he goes like a spear at Royale. Royale just catches him, picks him up, and throws him. And he's getting ready to land him on the ring steps. I say, Bob, no! And so he turns him a little bit. He still threw him over the top rope to the floor, but I think me yelling might have saved the kid's life, because he would have went head first on the ring steps. But, yeah, that crowd was honest that night.
Said that's the most. The promoter and the booker said that's the most heat they've ever seen anybody in their organization.
They had a whole bunch of guys who knew how to wrestle, but they didn't know how to work. They knew how to go out there and do moves, but they didn't know how to do what the crowd needed to see to twist them into hating or loving you. They just went out there and did what moves they thought they should do. They didn't pay any attention to the crowd. I pay less attention to my opponent than I do the crowd.
Yeah. Is there any moments in your career you regret?
Well, I went to Harlan, Kentucky, and I got married to Styling Stacy's car. That was a mistake. Not that we didn't get along in the beginning and everything, but I think it was a really rough separation. I regret talking to Mac Douglas when he called me up and said, "Hey, how's things going?" There's probably some young guys that were starting out that rubbed me the wrong way, that maybe instead of pulling them in and correcting them in a nicer way, maybe I got a little stiff on them. I remember this kid that when Roger Blade was running his show, I explained to him what I wanted to do on the finish. He said he understood it, and he was supposed to hit the corner, and I was going to do like a high leg, like a leg lariat in the corner, and he was going to feed out for a super kick. And I'm like, all right, let's go home now. I send him in the corner, I go for that, and he moves out of the way. And now I want the people to move out of the way, because I take a upside down, land on my head kind of bump every time now. It's pretty neat, but at the time I didn't know I could do that. So he moves out of the way, and I cleared the top rope. I had to reach up and catch the top rope to save my life, and the ring was 2 feet from the wall there, so I almost hit a concrete wall with my head and tumbled into the concrete floor afterwards. So I get in the ring, and I'm back in the corner, and I chopped him a few times, and we wrestled a little bit, and I try to go for it again. He don't move this time, I hit the high leg lariat, but he don't feed out for the super kick. So finally he steps out, not really feeding out, and I hit the super kick anyway, but I hit the super kick. I mean, I kicked him right square in his forehead, left the boot print on his head. He turned a complete backflip, ended with his feet on the top rope. And we never saw a kick again. honestly, I would have pulled him aside after the match. Maybe not kicked him so hard, pulled him aside after the match. Maybe he'd be wrestling today. Maybe he is. Maybe he moved somewhere else.
Yeah.
Got trained somewhere else. I mean, I don't really. I guess I don't really regret that because I don't really tell the story pretty often. But I don't know that he would have been a good wrestler or a bad wrestler. And if I wrestled him again and he did the same thing, I would have done the same thing. If somebody does that to me today, I'm still going to kick him in the forehead. Now, any business relations I ever have with Christian Skyfire. Not just the money the money owing incident. Even years before that, I booked him on a show. He was wrestling for InsideWrestlingTruth, which is Bobo Brazil's company, regularly, and they didn't have a show one week, so I booked him to Madison, and he come up and Spaz at the time was hand making belts, and they looked good. He made the belts that looked like the old Mid-Southern Championship that Lawler held, and he came up missing. And I saw, I didn't know who took it or anything, calling around asking people, and then 2 different wrestlers called me, and then they worked with Skyfire on a show in Tennessee, and they saw this belt in his bag. So, dealing with Skyfire has always been pretty bad. I ended up getting the belt back, and this was before MySpace and Facebook, but the internet was still there, and I emailed every wrestling promoter that I could think of, anybody that I knew, and then I also emailed Dale Bass, and at that time Dale Bass knew everybody, and anybody that he didn't know and I didn't know, my brother knew. And my brother, he only worked for a few years, but he was still a pretty big deal in this area while he was working. So between the 3 of us, we emailed everybody we knew. Christian Skyfire came in and told Dale, I'm not telling you this because I want you to get him shot on or I want you to get my belt back. I'm telling you this so you know that Christian Skyfire was still a belt.
Right. And
he sends me an email, and believe it or not, I still have this because I don't delete anything. And I've got emails from Hotmail from 1994. So anyway, he sends me a message back saying, hey man, I'll bring the belt back if you'll email all these people and tell them I didn't steal it. Well, why would I do that? You did steal it. I'm like, you bring it back, there's no altercation, I don't have to chase you down and get it. I will email everybody and tell them that you took it, it's red, you brought it back with, no big incident or anything like that, you brought it back on your own. And he's like, sure, yeah, I'll bring it back. Well, Vito was there, and Vito comes up to me, Vito Andretti, and says, let me work him. So, all right, Vito, you can work him. And Vito says, I'm not going to hurt him, but I'm going to teach him a lesson. All right. So Vito goes out there and works him. I'm watching the match, and I'm like, Vito's not really doing anything to him, nothing out of the ordinary. And then it happens. He sends it in the ropes. And you always tell when a clothesline hurts for Vito because when he clotheslines left-handed, you're just fine. When he clotheslines right-handed, you're seeing stars. He clotheslines Skyfire right-handed, and he pins him after a clothesline, 1, 2, 3, and comes back to the back, and Vito's arm is bleeding from Skyfire's tooth. And Skyfire comes back, and he says, man, he knocked my tooth out. I couldn't tell the difference. But I mean, when you only got 2, you know when you lose one. So, but other than Skyfire dealings and Matt Douglas dealings, I've wrestled for 22 years in 48 states, and I've been happy almost every day of it. I mean, there's times when I get down a little bit, I'm like, maybe I should quit. And I did take some time off here and there, but then I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
I definitely have to throw out the Matt Douglas error, incident, whatever. I'd say probably the one other thing I regret in this business is like the one booking that I had to miss for Jerry Wilson at HPW. It's kind of out of my control. I mean,
actually, Jerry and I worked for Jerry when he first started running. He had Dutch Mantel and ever showed for a while. He had Dutch, and this is, Dutch still looked then like he looked when I was a kid, so it's kind of a big deal. And I quit Jerry's one night. I didn't necessarily quit so much as I was just not going to be there for a while. And on the same night, Roger Blade quit there, and I don't know the full story because I wasn't there, but I know that Roger had his guy tear the ring down in the middle of Jerry's main event. And that didn't set well, and Jerry always put me with Roger in this. We were together in this, and I was already gone when this happened. So me and Jerry had issues for years, and when Matt and I had issues, I went back up to Booth Pro, and I got Royale and Noble booked on a show up there, and I got him booked on a show up there. And we actually had him involved in the storyline. And what he's talking about there on the booking that we missed is when we took the show back over in Madison, we were going to double shot. We were going to do Jerry's and my show the same night. And my wife calls me as we're getting ready to head to Columbus to do Jerry's show and tells me my dog got hit by a car. And now this, you hear your dog get hit by a car, you don't think about it like this, but my dog was part of my family. He was a 13-year-old dog, and it was a house dog. It wasn't an outside dog. I mean, he was like a person. He had a real personality and everything. So, I mean, it hit me hard. I mean, I think it hit him hard, and it hit all my friends hard because anybody who knew me knew my dog. I mean, it really crushed me. I think I quit working for other promotions for a while just because I went into depression for a little while.
What does Eric Draven and the Texas Outlaw do for fun?
Well, even after 22 years, wrestling is really all I do. I no longer watch it. I don't think I've watched wrestling since USWA closed, other than, I mean, I'll turn it on every now and then. I watched the first TNA show when they ran on a Monday, the Angle Styles match. I watched like 20 minutes of SmackDown a couple weeks ago, and about 20 minutes of Raw last week. So I no longer watch wrestling for fun, but I wrestle. I don't really play video games anymore. I used to do a lot of that. Baseball, I think mostly actually playing baseball or wrestling. I keep up with Cincinnati Reds baseball. So I think that's what I do. I think it's about all I do.
I watch a lot of wrestling. I'll watch whatever I can get my hands on, pretty much. Whether it be new or old, I'll just pick it, watch it, critique it. You know what I'm saying? Like, whether it be ROH, TNA, WWE, Japan.
What's y'all's favorite pro wrestling moment as a fan?
As a fan, I guess I got more than one. The Lawler Nick Bockwinkel match. I know they had several, but the one where Lawler had Bockwinkel in the corner and he was pommeling him, and then the referee comes in, and Lawler shoves the referee down. He goes back to hitting Bockwinkel and comes in and does it again. And then the third time, Bockwinkel pushes Lawler out of the way, hits the ref, and Lawler makes the pin, 1, 2, 3, and picks up the belt. The referee shakes his head that Lawler wins, and then he takes the belt back. That to me is probably the best match and finish that I've ever seen. Other memories that I have vividly is Lawler getting hit by a collar by Eddie Gilbert, and Lawler getting thrown over the top rope by the Duke and hitting that big table back when the tables were real hard, like made out of 2x4s and stuff. But as a fan, really anything with Lawler and the whole Ricky Steamboat Ric Flair feud was great. I don't know why, but one match really sticks out that wasn't even one of my favorite wrestlers. I was never a big Sting fan, and I was never a Mike Rotunda fan, but Clash of Champions, I'm not sure what year it was. I was roughly 10. Sting won the TV title from Mike Rotunda. I think it was just a roll-up with finish, but for some reason that match really stands out as one of the best matches that I'd seen. And the split of the Mega Powers, I was never a WWF fan, never. But the split of the Mega Powers was also like a really good angle. And I recently had people send me links to that on Facebook so I can watch that again, because I miss when wrestling was believable angles, and now angles taking place behind the scenes and whatnot. I know that one took place behind the scenes, but it was believable that the cameramen would follow them there. So I guess those are probably the ones that stand out the most for me.
There's a lot. I mean, I used to live at the Little Gardens on Tuesday nights, so I've seen a lot of great matches.
Yeah.
It's just hard to narrow
Yeah, if you can't think of anything, that's fine.
It wouldn't be fair to all of them.
Yeah.
Just narrow down.
I remember the Lawler Dundee scaffold match when they got up there and they were dropping the. I can't remember if it was pumpkins or watermelons. I think it was watermelons. They were dropping the watermelons off there. I mean, I was a kid at the time, so it seemed like, wow, somebody's going to get thrown off there and get hurt really bad. Anything that made me believe it was real good.
How do you guys want to be remembered when you retire?
Used to, I wanted, like, just to be remembered as, that really good wrestler, that the fans really got into. Now I kind of like to be thought of as the guy that can help the younger guys develop, and that's really what I do it for now. I think I enjoy training and teaching the younger guys to actually use logic in the business more than I enjoy actually being in the ring and doing stuff. I mean, my biggest problem with wrestling is that people don't sell moves anymore. People don't think about. I mean, even the guys in WWE. I know this has been a while, but I remember the feud with Booker T and Steve Austin. This is before I turned off wrestling. This is actually what turned me off of it. They were in the back fighting. They got into a fight backstage, and the cameraman was right there. Well, sure, there could be a cameraman right there. It's possible, right? So Booker T goes and gets in his car, and Steve Austin goes and gets in his, and they're having this high-speed chase, and there's a cameraman following it. Well, all right, that might be believable. They're in a grocery store. They're fighting. The cameraman's right there. Okay, cameraman following them there. I'm still, it's getting harder to believe, but I'm still, all right, it's believable. Booker T goes to the church, and he's in the confessional. Steve Austin's in the other side. The cameraman sees both of them at the same time. If that cameraman knows that both of them's there, Booker T knows that's Steve Austin on the other side. If that cameraman could see both of them, Booker T would be like, "What you doing over there?"
Right.
And he would know that that was Steve Austin, or Steve Austin would just reach around and choke him. And at that point, combine that with Vince McMahon doing the thing where he was in a shower with one of the divas, and he's like, "Don't tell my wife." Well, Vince, if you don't want your wife to know, don't put it on TV.
Right.
So really, yeah, what I want to be remembered is a guy who don't do stuff like that. I want to be, of course, I'm kind of contradicting myself because I'm doing a shoot interview, but I want to be that guy who protected kayfabe to the end, other than this shoot interview right here. But I mean, people come up to me and they ask me if wrestling's real or fake, and they know. They know the answer, whatever it might be. I always tell them you can't fake gravity because that's the truth. You pick me up and you throw me down, I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt. I mean, I'm sporting a pretty big bruise on my bicep. I can't get that in the camera right there, but you can verify that's a pretty big bruise. And that came from Saturday night wrestling. And I mean, I always get bumps and bruises. So is it real? That's up to you to decide. But that's what I want to be. I want to be the guy who teaches the younger generation to preserve what little bit of that we still have, what little bit of magic we still have.
I just like to be remembered. I mean, a lot of people forget about people until somebody brings it back up. It's one of those guys that just sticks with you.
One more thing I kind of like to be remembered as, I'm sure he will too, is a guy that can work with anybody. I mean, because I can work somebody who works modern style wrestling, and keep up with them. I won't say that I can go toe-to-toe chain wrestling with them, as I've already said. I used to be a good chain wrestler, but I kind of let that go. But I can still keep up. And I could go in the ring with a guy who wrestles his power match, and I could be the guy that gets thrown around real good and takes all the big bumps. Or I could be the guy who does the throwing around, as long as the guy's 250 pounds or less. So I want to be that guy that can work anybody. And I was telling your partner here this the other day, and don't get me wrong, I have nothing but respect for him, but we used to work Jimmy. He was Jimmy Clough at the time. He's Jimmy Clough now. We had a whiteboard that sat in the dressing room, and Jimmy would come in and he would work so and so, and this guy would come up to me, well, man, I don't want to work Jimmy anymore. He's just too stiff. So all right. Then the next guy, I put him in there. I don't want to work Jimmy anymore, man. He's just too stiff. Then I put him in there with a guy who can handle stiff, and he comes up. He's like, I don't want to work Jimmy anymore because I can't really do anything with him. And it got to the point to where we had a whiteboard in the dressing room, and we had a list on there, will not work Jimmy Clough. And it got to the point to where everybody's name was on that list except for one or two people. And I mean, I run a weekly show, so I don't just have 14 or 15 wrestlers that I use. I have, because some people were booked here this week, and this other guy's booked here this week. So I got, at any given time, I could name 50 wrestlers that we have on a semi-regular basis. And this list was 47 long. And I'm not saying that Jimmy's not a good worker. I've worked him once, and I didn't have a problem at all. I will say that he is hard to do anything with. I do know he lays people in the corner and stands on them. And I don't know if he still does. I haven't seen him since the last time I booked him. He stands on them in the corner and leans on them and takes people's breath away. And I know that he's really stiff and whatnot. Outside of that, I talked to Jimmy. I love Jimmy. He's great. But I don't want to be the guy that people says, man, I don't want to work with that guy.
In closing, you have any last words or anything you want to say to your fans?
To my fans, keep coming, keep supporting wrestling. If it's not here, support good independent wrestling. By good independent wrestling, I mean Cruiser Pro Wrestling is good. Companies that still protect business is still give you a quality show, give you your money's worth. That's really all I can say. I mean, if you enjoy it, keep going. I hope that they choose this wrestling company over any others, but I know that this being a weekly show, if they're in between here and a monthly show, on that monthly show, they're probably going to go to that once a month show because that's the only opportunity. And, you know, it's just like everything else.
Yeah.
Good movies on at the movie theater.
Right.
On the movies that week.
I just say thanks for the support, whether it's good or bad. Support good indie wrestling.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.